Man, shout out to Dante's Boxing Nation.
DBN Nation, of course. Support DBN Nation. You're hearing it from Floyd Money Mayweather.
It's Terrence Crawford, and you're watching Dante's Boxing Nation.
This is Deontay the Bronze Bomber Wilder, and you're watching Dante's Boxing Nation, baby.
Hi, you're watching Dante's Boxing Nation. Woo! Hey.
If you know, you know. Now, we all know the fight between Errol Spence and Shawn Porter is this weekend. Now, both fighters are hyping up the fight. However, Kenny Porter, Shawn Porter's dad/trainer, came in between, digging the past of Errol Spence around the time when Errol Spence went to the Olympics, and Kenny Porter was the trainer for the Olympic team. He stated, "I didn't make Errol Spence lose in the Olympics. He lost himself. And he's the only fighter that lost twice in the Olympics." That being said, I understand hyping up the fight. However, downplaying your opponent is another, because if you end up losing to him, then you just make yourself look bad because you already downplayed him and you lost to him in the process. And if you actually beat him, you're taking credit away from your own self. That being said, as far as the Olympic loss that Errol Spence suffered and continued, it was overturned. The reason why is because Errol Spence clearly won the fight. We all know a lot of fighters do get robbed in the Olympics. For example, Roy Jones. We all know Roy Jones should have been a gold medalist. I mean, the way he fought the guy for the gold medal, he should have won 2 gold medals for that performance. However, he ended up getting robbed, even though he dropped his opponent, beat his opponent up the whole fight, almost stopped him. The referee should have stopped that fight, really, but he let that fight continue, and they ended up robbing him. And his opponent even raised Roy Jones' hand while he was crying because he felt that Roy Jones won the fight, just like Floyd Mayweather when he got robbed for his gold medals also. However, Roy was more dominant, and they still robbed him. So we all know robberies happen in the Olympics due to politics and beef between countries, etc., etc. We're not going to get into that. However, what we're going to get into is why Errol Spence lost, and that bout in particular got overturned is because Errol Spence clearly won the fight. And since Kenny Porter was the head coach in the Olympics, he should know that Errol Spence's opponent committed 9 holding fouls in the 3rd round alone, and he also intentionally spit out his mouthpiece in the 2nd round. And he was losing the rounds and the fight in the process. And the referee should have deducted 4 points for all the fouls. However, he didn't, and that's why that bout got overturned. So Kenny Porter should have known all these things, but he chooses not to point out the facts. And Errol Spence, by that time, he thought he lost the fight. Mentally and physically, he was hurt. So when they awarded him the victory and went on to fight his next opponent, he lost that bout. I'm not giving him any excuses. He didn't win a gold medal or none of that. However, he did not lose his first bout. And Errol Spence, we all know he has more of a pro style than an amateur style, because he likes to go to the body, break his opponent down. And that's more effective going 12 rounds than 3 fast pacing rounds. That's why I stated his style is made more for the pros than amateurs. So that being said, Kenny Porter digging the past doesn't make any sense to me, because if you want to point anything out, how about you talk about when he sparred Shawn Porter before going to the Olympics? Because if I could recall correctly, Shawn Porter was preparing for the Alexander bout to fight for the championship belt, or he was preparing for his 10th bout. Regardless of either one, he had way more pro experience than Errol Spence at the time. And according to rumors, Errol Spence had the best of them. Even when both of the fighters talked about the sparring match, you could tell that Errol Spence had the better of the sparring match. So why doesn't Kenny Porter talk about the sparring match? Obviously, you got to keep the same energy. When Shawn Porter fought Keith Thurman, he stayed mentioning the sparring match and how Keith Thurman was running. However, when it comes to Shawn Porter and Errol Spence sparring match, he ain't talking about that. So keep the same energy, because according to rumors, Kenny Porter told Errol Spence he had to go. since he was doing too well against Shawn Porter during their sparring match. And Errol Spence had no pro experience at the time. So how come Kenny Porter doesn't keep the same energy like he did with Keith Thurman and try to release the tape, since by his own admission, only the Olympic organization has the sparring match, and since he was the head coach, he could get his hands on that sparring match, so he could easily get the sparring match for the fans. But none of that matters at this point. The fight is this weekend, so we'll see who's the better fighter of the two, and we'll see if whatever Kenny Porter said holds weight and come into play during the fight. So subscribe below if you're trying to get smarter by the minute. If you're trying to get dumber by the second, don't listen to these casual fans. Check out my new show, Split Decision. Follow Lunatoon Boxing on Instagram. All the links will be in the description box below. So like I stated, it's just too much of a low blow for Kenny Porter to state that Errol Spence is the only fighter in the Olympics that lost twice and was allowed to continue when he knows what happened in the Olympics, when he was the head coach, when he witnessed the fight firsthand, and he knows all about it, and that Errol Spence won the fight. So why bring it up and shade Errol Spence in the media when you were about to fight the man? So if Shawn Porter has anything to bring to the table, he will, and he will perform fight night. So I don't see no point of Kenny Porter doing so. Like I said, it's just too much of a low blow, especially when it's not true. Like I stated, you could talk about the sparring match. It's a better argument than talking about the Olympic match that doesn't matter. Shawn Porter didn't even make it to the Olympics as far as I know. However, Shawn Porter does have good amateur wins against Andre Usyk, I believe. Probably even a Jacob. I'm not sure. So he had a lot of great amateur wins. We'll see how well he performs against an Errol Spence, especially when Errol Spence is the favorite. It will be a great fight. Check out the fight on Fox pay-per-view. Buy the fight. Support the movement. Shout out to New Media. And like I always say, subscribe below if you're trying to get smarter by the minute. If you're trying to get dumber by the second, don't listen to these decafs. Follow DBN, Travel Nation. All these links will be in the description box below. So support the movement. And like I always say, to be continued on the next episode of IKTV. Peace.